Hello, everyone. Welcome to the M Global Presents series. My name is Jennifer Schultz. I'm with the Global Programs and Strategy Alliance, and that is the central international office for the university system of all 5 of our campuses. The goal of this series is to highlight the impact of the university's international teaching, research, and engagement, and discuss other timely global related topics. This month, we're featuring faculty, staff, and students who are actively engaged in preparing global ready students in our classrooms. I'd like to acknowledge and thank our partner for this webinar, the Center for Educational Innovation. We'll start with just a few tips here. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can submit a question and it will be incorporated into the discussion as time allows. I also want to let you know that the audience is very diverse. There's faculty, staff, and students from our campus community. We have alumni, professionals from the international education field, and members of the local, national, and international community. And so we try to keep these conversations, a bit on the informative and general side. This is not a deep dive for practitioners. And so just letting you know who is all here in the audience with us. And then finally, the session is being recorded. So if you have to step away or you can't finish or you miss part of it, or ideally you want to share it with someone later, you will be getting an email with a recording of that. And so with that, I will now turn it over to Gail Woodruff. She is the Director of Curriculum and Campus Internationalization for the university system.
Thank you, Jennifer. I also extend my warm welcome to our audience today, and thank you for joining us for this discussion with our University of Minnesota colleagues who are on the cutting edge of classroom efforts to prepare students to tackle the global challenges that they will face when they graduate. Today, we will dive into what our instructors are doing in a wide range of college classrooms to prepare students who are global ready. We will also hear what students are learning as they prepare to enter a globally interconnected workplace and society. Our panelists will speak about current educational practices and their vision for making our classrooms supportive of global learning for all students. As we begin, we acknowledge that the University of Minnesota sits on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Lakota, and Dakotas peoples, and we are here as their guests. Our efforts in international programs have sought for many years to bridge the understanding between nations and peoples, and we bring that awareness into today's session. Before we jump into our discussion, let me provide you with a brief overview about our motivation for being here today. I would first like to mention that the images that you're going to see are not stock photos. These are photos of our professors, all of whom have been involved in our programs. This is Brian Dingman from the Crookston campus. You'll see Eric Castle, Katie Chapman, Courtney Bergman, all from Crookston, and David Beard from Duluth. So we are all here today because we care about what our college students are learning in our classrooms that will prepare them to enter the workplace and society in general. And we believe that the classroom is an important place for students to learn the skills, the knowledge, and the perspectives that will help them understand the world. It is our belief that it is the intentional approach that our professors and instructors take when they're designing their classes and engaging their students that really matters. And we take into consideration the global diversity of our students who sit in our classrooms so that we can make those learning spaces equitable for all students. By focusing on what we teach and also how we teach, we recognize that both the teachers and the students influence the learning environment in our classrooms. So when we think about the characteristics of students who are globally ready, we like to start by designing our courses so that we ask the question, what do we want our students to learn about the world? And perhaps more importantly, about themselves. Another way of asking this question is, what do our students need to know, be able to do, and care about when they graduate and enter a globally interconnected workplace and society? This is one of the most important questions we ask faculty to think about when they design the learning goals for their courses and think about the characteristics of students who are globally ready in their disciplines. We then turn to what are we teaching in our classrooms and how are we teaching? As we know that what students learn in our classrooms makes an impact on their future, and we as teachers impact that learning. It's these beliefs and principles that have guided our work at the University of Minnesota to create professional development programs for our faculty and instructors who are seeking to prepare their students to be globally ready. Over the years, the University of Minnesota has been a leader in innovating several programs to support professors and instructors who wish to deepen student learning that happens in their on-campus courses. Most notably, we have created the Internationalizing Teaching and Learning Faculty Program, or ITL for short, and a newer initiative called Teaching in Globally Diverse Classes, which supports instructors who wish to engage international and US students more in the classroom. Here are some of the colleagues that have been in our programs over the years. So no matter what your connection is to the University of Minnesota, we hope you take pride in the innovative teaching that is happening in our classrooms by our committed professors and instructors who truly care about our students. And over the past 10 years, we're excited to share that over 170 faculty and instructors have participated in our programs. Over 250 courses have been impacted, and over 40,000 students have been reached. This is truly something to be celebrated, and it's certainly a great foundation for us to build from. So today you will hear from those colleagues who have been involved with these initiatives. We're especially excited that you will hear from the faculty and about the faculty, as these stories about teaching are not always told publicly. Our programs have impacted all 5 University of Minnesota campuses: Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester, and the Twin Cities. And there are dozens of academic disciplines that are represented here in this work. The colleagues on the panel today are honoring the representatives of all the programs and all their peers. So before we turn to our panel, let me thank our team and our partners for their support and their hard work on these programs over the years. And I would especially like to thank our Internationalizing the Curriculum and Campus team for all their hard work in getting us prepared for today's panel: Elizabeth Schwartz, Ann Smith, and Yulia Kartoshkina. So now let's hear how the University of Minnesota is preparing students to be globally ready. Let me introduce our panel to you. And when I introduce them, they can just give a quick wave. David Beard, Associate Professor of English, Linguistics, and Writing Studies on the University of Minnesota Duluth campus. Kate Martin, Co-Director of the University of Minnesota's system-wide Center for Educational Innovation and co-founder of the Internationalizing Teaching and Learning Faculty Program. Amanda Sames, PhD candidate in Conservation Biology on the Twin Cities campus. David Touay, Assistant Professor of Communication at Duluth. And Dina Wassenberg, Teaching Associate Professor of Biology, Teaching and Learning on the Twin Cities campus. Our panelists have been engaged with our Internationalizing Teaching and Learning programs as participants, mentors, or teammates, and we are really honored to have them representing the programs today. So let's start by asking all of our panelists to briefly respond to our first question. And the first question is, what is a global ready student? And why is it important to prepare students to be globally ready? And we're going to start with David Beard.
Hi there, everybody. So in my view, a globally ready student has the skills that place them in the careers that they want, that position them to be leaders in their communities, and that make them successful in interpersonal relationships. And they achieve those things by entering every interaction with attention to difference, with a cultural humility that guides their responses to others, and the confidence to pick up their responsibilities to lead their communities.
Thanks, David. Let's hear from Dina.
Hi, everyone. So as I look at it, a globally ready student has to acknowledge and know that they see the world through a filter, and has started to think about what that filter is and how it affects their perceptions of the world. They, similar to what David said, that they approach differences with both curiosity and humility, and that they actually have enough experience that they can delight in learning about things that are different from them, about meeting new people, learning about new cultures and locations. I think this is important because I think I teach environmental biology, and a lot of times we think about the international and global nature of problems, but I also, and that's true, problems like climate change, these are global problems, but also there are global solutions to problems. And so internationally ready students are ready to receive potential solutions from places other than where they live. And so I think that's a really important part as well.
Thanks, Dina. Let's hear from David Touay.
Hi, everyone. So I would define globally ready student, global ready student as, a student with a broader outlook, a student who can embrace, new ideas. As the world gets more interconnected than ever before, I would think of a global ready student as one who is able to create connections, and collaborations with others, irrespective of physical boundaries. I also think about, such a student as one who, appreciates difference and sameness. And of course, we have to create global ready students because, the world is changing, and we know that the future of work is changing. There are transnational corporations now that, our students would want to work in. And of course, just like Dina said, the issue of the global challenges of our time that continue to arise, challenges that require the collaborative efforts of all people around the globe. And I think, of course, the global health pandemic that we are in right now is a case in point.
Thanks, David. Let's hear from Kate.
Just to build on what David and Dina and David have said, I want to use an example from one of our U of M faculty who teaches an urban agriculture course to kind of exemplify how she has built global readiness into a course that is actually fully situated in the Twin Cities. It's a course that includes how racism contributes to food system injustice here in the Twin Cities. So it's Professor Mary Rogers. And her fundamental learning goals include students learning about their own cultural identities, where their values and attitudes come from, privilege and how that plays out in the content of this course in particular, service learning project in the community where students interact with people whose lived experiences and perspectives may be different from their own. So you can imagine in a course on this topic, even though it's situated in the Twin Cities, students are developing the kinds of ways of knowing, ways of being, and ways of doing in the world that will help them apply those kinds of knowing, doing, and being in all sorts of contexts, locally and globally.
Thanks, Kate. And Amanda.
Thank you. So I'm going to echo some of the themes that you've already heard. But to me, I think a global ready student is able to adapt to a wide range of situations. They recognize the value of working with people from different backgrounds. They can think at multiple scales, from local to global and back again. And they really care about connecting with others and connecting across difference. And all of those things and everything you've heard my colleagues mention already are really important because, as we've acknowledged, increasingly the problems that students are going to face in the world, things like climate change and food security, global health, water access, those really require the ability to work effectively at multiple scales, from local to global, and with people from around the world or from vastly different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences. So we need to make sure we're preparing them for that.
Thanks, Amanda. Well, for all of you joining us today, I'm sure you're curious about what the professors and instructors have been doing in their classrooms to ensure that the university is preparing these global ready students. Kate, over the years, you have worked with faculty development programs that have been aimed at supporting professors and instructors who want to change their on-campus courses to build in more global, international, and intercultural learning for their students. And you've been a leader in innovating the program that we launched 10 years ago that really looked at internationalizing teaching and learning, where professors focused on their on-campus courses. As you reflect on the professors and instructors you've worked with over the years, would you please share a few examples with us of innovative practices that you've seen faculty integrate into their courses?
Sure. It's been actually a real privilege to be able to work with the faculty and instructors and to be able to tell some of their stories through these examples. So I'll just give a couple of kind of broad categories and some specific applications. So one really powerful approach to immersing students in this kind of understanding and appreciating others' perspectives is through a virtual learning method where it's called COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning. And in this method, University of Minnesota professors jointly design a course or a class session or an assignment with a professor from a university in another country teaching the same subject matter. So students in the courses in both countries are learning how the content and disciplinary practices play out in the other settings. Several faculty have done this on all 5 campuses, I believe, including design professor Abimbola Asojo, who's done this with faculty in Nigeria. And I'll just highlight one other. Nursing professor Teddy Potter has worked with a faculty partner in Iceland, where they had students, among other things, compare how differences in socialized and private health care affected patient care and nursing practices in each country. And I think that was really a profound kind of learning that is different than just reading about another country's system of healthcare, for example. The other kind of broad, really widely used approach for perspective taking in courses that many instructors have done is centered around adaptations of an activity that Professor Denny Falk, in education at Duluth, introduced us to, called the Global Village. And this activity is based on something you all may have heard of, that where you take the world population, and if you boiled it down to a village of 100 people, who would be represented? And in this notion, you have 61 people from Asia, 14 people from Africa, 11 Europeans, 9 Central or South Americans, 5 from North America. Australia and Oceania don't even make the cut, right? There's nobody there. And so what instructors, like what Denny had done in his class, was take this distribution of representation and assign students the identity of a global villager, and then carefully guide students through a research process where they begin to learn about kind of the social, political, cultural influences that may be shaped how their global villager might view, in his case, the content of the course. And then students, as they engage in the course discussions and the course assignments, they share both their own perspective and that of the global villager. And so when Denny presented this, light bulbs just started going off for a number of instructors, faculty who have gone through the internationalizing program, and they've adapted it across a variety of disciplines. So for example, Sarah Buchanan has used this in French, Brooke Miller has used this in media, Paula Peterson in psychology, Arira Anchwari in early childhood education, Diana Carwan in environmental courses. And then if I have a minute to just share one more example, biology professor Katie Chapman has adapted this activity in a course on environmental remediation, which is, cleaning up toxic sites. And so what she used to do was give students a site in the United States that they had to understand kind of the science of the pollution or the toxic site, and then propose a cleanup plan that focused on kind of why would you choose this method given the science. And after hearing about the Global Villager activity, she changed her assignment to include sites that were located around the world in different locations. So students now had to work with their groups to not only apply the science, but they also needed to understand how local customs, cultures, histories, political situations would affect the remediation plan that they proposed. So, I mean, you can just really see how one notion, this global villager notion, can be applied across a lot of different disciplines in ways that really change the student experience in the course.
It's so helpful to hear those examples. So thank you, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue hearing some more examples, and this time from the faculty who have been making the changes to their classes over the years. David, Beard, and Dina, you know, as you reflect on the work you've done to prepare students to be globally ready through this involvement you've had in the Internationalizing Teaching and Learning cohort program, would you each please share a little bit with us about the changes that you've made in what and how you have taught? And let's go ahead and start with David.
So I guess the first thing I would point out is that being affiliated with the Internationalizing Teaching and Learning program has really cracked open what I think of and what I look for when I think about internationalizing, and perhaps also when I think about our responsibilities to address diversity more broadly in my classrooms. I often tell people I see the international everywhere. A student working on a project in one of my internationalized classes said, well, can I talk about the St. Lawrence Seaway? And I suddenly realized, by gum, we exist at a kind of nexus point for international trade and other international points of contact here in Duluth. I find the international in a course that for a long time I taught about literature of the Vietnam War. Students said, well, can't we talk about the other perspectives? And what other perspectives do we want to talk about? And it occurred to me that I exist in a state with one of the largest Hmong populations in the world. The international is right in my back door when it comes time to talk about revising my curriculum. And the other thing I think that participating in this program has taught, it's taught me, you know, even though I teach in a kind of greater Minnesota campus with what appears to be a lack of diversity relative to my colleagues on the Twin Cities campus, being part of this program helps me look at those students and find ways to recognize the great diversity even amongst what appears to be, at least ethnically, a relatively homogeneous population. I see diversity everywhere, even in my room full of greater Minnesota students.
Thanks, David. Dina, would you please share?
Yeah. So one of the things this program has really taught me is a lot of the things that I'm assuming, I need to stop assuming them and start being overt about them. And so, for example, when talking about our perspectives on environmental issues, I need to be overt on what makes up my own filter and my own lens through which I see environmental issues. You know, when we talk about food, I have to acknowledge that I have never farmed. I have only gardened, and that's very different. And, you know, I may be the daughter of a former farmer and the wife of a former farmer, but I have never done that work. And so I think approaching the topic with a little bit of a disclaimer about here's how I'm seeing the world. I have read about farming, but I have not done farming. You know, and so that overtness I've kind of carried over to other parts of the course where I ask students officially to bring in their cultural backgrounds and bring in the things they bring to this course, and to give us all a chance to kind of celebrate that. So for example, when we're talking about environmental impacts of food production, we spend the first time kind of warming up by everybody gives us an example of a food or a meal that reminds them of home, however they define home. And so we take some time to basically celebrate that we're all coming to this issue of food from some differences, and sort of we all get hungry as we do it, but to sort of celebrate that there are these these incredible differences in our food experiences. And that's something that we bring into the classroom and we welcome in the classroom. And so I think just this level of being overt about asking students to bring their whole selves into my class has really changed the way I teach and changed the way I kind of see my role in the classroom.
Thank you. Thanks, Dina and David. You both have been so thoughtful and really committed to making these changes in your courses. And, you know, I think your students are very lucky to have you as their teachers. You shared your experiences with others by being mentors in the ITL program, and you've coached numerous colleagues across the university system in a wide range of disciplines. And Dina, we know that you have a great example to share with the audience today from the mentor experience you've had this past year with our new cohort of faculty.
Yeah, so I had the privilege of working with Missy Safner and Maria Rude from the School of Nursing. And I'm so inspired by what they're going to do to healthcare. Like this, they have the way they're teaching nurses is amazing. And so what they've done is they've incorporated these intercultural reflections for the new nursing student populations and incorporated activities to help their students understand some of the diversity of the ways cultures approach issues. And they teach a reproductive health course. And so different cultures, the way they approach issues of pregnancy, birth control, and fertility, et cetera. And they're doing this with such a sophisticated eye toward, you know, while bringing in that various cultures may have different perspectives on these issues, but also avoiding teaching stereotypes of these cultures as they teach that there may be a diversity of outcomes, but we can't assume that anybody holds one particular view based on their culture. And so the way the activities they've designed with case studies that are rich with detail and rich with examples are inspirational, and their focus on asking the future nurses themselves to reflect on how their own culture might influence the way they perceive the treatment that they would provide. And so I think I'm so inspired and excited at what they've done.
It's, you know, it's really great to hear your enthusiasm for those faculty who are new to this experience of internationalizing their classes. And David Tuay, you just joined the ITL cohort program this year, and the team and the mentors really have all enjoyed the new ideas and the fresh perspectives that you've brought into the program. What are you really looking forward to having your students experience in your newly internationalized courses?
Thank you, Gail. I'm so excited to have gone through the ITL program. If there is one thing that I've appreciated about the ITL program, is the mentorship, as well as the resources, of course. For example, in the book by Dave Fink about creating significant learning experiences. And that's exactly one thing that I've done with my course, which is called Media in Africa, that I teach here in UMD Duluth. And so in the course, I've tried as much to make it a learner-centered course, learning-centered. In the course, I've revised the learning goals to support what Dave Fink actually calls multiple, kinds of significant learning, which basically means, emphasizing several dimensions of learning and not just foundational knowledge. And so I've had a chance to think deeply about, other dimensions of learning, such as application so that I can help my students to apply what they have learned in new areas or in new ways. I've had to think about integration, having students connect ideas, the human dimension, helping students to interact with others and even with oneself, and even other aspects like caring and even learning how to learn. And then on top of that, of course, I've created new assessment activities. And most of these activities, of course, I'm trying to have students, develop their cultural self-awareness and deepen their international learning. And I teach a lot about media in Africa, about Uganda, about Rwanda, about South Africa, about Ethiopia. And so I want them to learn, aspects of the media from all of those countries. So in short, anyway, I've been trying to come up with, learning goals that are specific, that are concrete, and that, I think more about what students should get out of the course. Thank you.
Wow, it's really exciting to hear this, and we're excited for you to begin teaching these new courses. Amanda, you've worn many hats while you've been at the University of Minnesota. You've taught classes, you've been a graduate student, you've been on our Internationalizing Teaching and Learning team, and in addition, you are a student leader who has been recognized with the Mestenhauser Student Award for Excellence in Campus Internationalization. What do you wish you could tell other students about the work that is happening to internationalize courses?
Well, I wish students knew more about the thought that goes into all of this work that faculty are doing and that the Internationalizing Campus and Curriculum team are doing. There's so much work, so much intention, so much care for students' futures that are behind all these efforts to internationalize courses. And instructors aren't investing all that time for their own sakes, right? It's really an investment for the students to help make sure that they're set up for success in a globally interconnected society. And kind of on the flip side, I think students don't always know why they're being asked to do something in a course. And explaining that this is why we're doing this activity. This is what I hope you take away from this experience. This is what I hope you remember 5 years down the line. That can be really helpful and really motivating. So giving students just a glimpse inside the thought process and the effort behind internationalization efforts, I think would be really valuable. So I encourage anyone who's doing any of this work, share it with your students.
Thanks, Amanda. And this is being recorded, so hopefully students will listen to this recording and really understand what is happening in their courses more. Let's go ahead and dig a little bit more into that impact that these pedagogical practices to promote global learning are having on our students. And David Beard, we'd like to really hear a little bit more from you because you've been really looking at integrating international and intercultural global learning goals and teaching activities in your courses since 2012. What impact do you believe your efforts to promote global learning in your courses have really had on your students?
I think the number one thing it does is it enchants their world a little bit. They learn to see parts of their built environment differently. There are spots around town in Duluth with artifacts sponsored by the Sister Cities program, and they don't really they're not conscious, they don't pay attention to those things and what they mean until they have a moment to reflect on themselves as a part of an international system, a global system. I think it does the same for their workplaces, right? Whether they're working retail and they have a sense of how that operates at the nexus of a kind of global international system, or when they think about their Twitter posts and the reach of their Twitter posts beyond what they can imagine. It tends to make everything, makes the world resonate a bit more for them. The other thing that really strikes me as I think about this, and maybe this is in part because we're in Minnesota and we're at the center of so much concern for equity and social justice nowadays, I find that teaching students about international issues opens the door to talking about and thinking about things that are important in those areas too, but it does it without raising some intrinsic biases that students may have, right? Some assumptions that racism was resolved in 1968, for example, and sexism was resolved with the suffrage movement, and everything must be fine now because we live in the United States. And if I can talk about these issues in international terms, dealing with cases and with examples that they aren't familiar with, they can't come with those senses that, well, it's already been handled. We're learning about it together for the first time. And then we can take that learning and apply it to our own context.
So important, all that you have said, and thank you for really doing what you're doing to make sure that the students are really experiencing that. Amanda, I think we have seen from some of the analysis of the data that we have on student learning outcomes from these courses that our faculty have been intentionally integrating global learning into, that there is a lot of learning that's happening. You've helped the team analyze a lot of this data on student learning outcomes. What have you discovered from this data about what students are really learning in our classrooms with regard to global, international, and intercultural?
Yeah, students are reporting a really wide range of knowledge and skills and attitudes that are affected by participating in an internationalized course. And so that includes things like sort of expanding their bubbles of things that they care about and are aware about and understand in the world, learning about themselves, coming to see their own perspective as just one of many perspectives. They're making connections between local experiences and global issues. Many of them reported feeling more adaptable and comfortable and curious in new situations and when they're interacting with people with different perspectives and backgrounds. And in our work with faculty, we talk a lot about aha moments. Students are having those too, those moments where they realize something brand new and it's really exciting and really energizing. And then in courses where instructors have focused on international student academic integration, the US students are reporting that they gained awareness about their international student colleagues' lives and backgrounds. And really importantly, I think the international students report gaining a sense of belonging within the classroom that they didn't have before. So those are wonderful results to see.
Wow, thank you, Amanda. And we just heard that you mentioned that our students are learning to interact with people with different perspectives and backgrounds other than their own. And this really seems to be an important learning outcome for our students. Our next two questions really are about this global diversity that's in our classroom, represented by the students and the faculty who come from all over the world. Dina, you have taught a lot of international students in your courses over the years, and you've worked to increase those interactions between your international students and your students who are from the US. Please tell us a little bit more about the experiences that you've had with your students from around the world in your classes and how this has really influenced how and what you are teaching.
So as I've tried to be more overt about inviting people to bring their whole selves into the class, I feel like I'm hearing a greater diversity of voices in my class than I did before. I'm observing conversations among students that who have different cultural backgrounds that seem to be happening more easily and more readily. And some of that is just a matter of giving them prompts and opportunities to bring up, for example, we talk about what is one environmental issue you grew up thinking about, which is really different if you grew up in a rural community versus an urban community, and will be different if you grew up, at a place far from Minnesota versus in Minnesota. And so then as we've had course discussions, I've heard just so many fascinating insights that have been really meaningful for me and for the students. For example, when we're talking about mining in northern Minnesota, there's a lot of controversy surrounding some mining projects up there. I had a Chilean student in the class who could tell us about mining communities in Chile that they had experienced and kind of what the impact of mining was on Chile, which was a perspective I had never heard before. And I don't think many of my students had heard that before. One time we were looking at a map of the world and looking at percentage of diet that comes from animal products. And we noticed that Mongolia stood out, as an area that had a pretty large consumption of animal products. And somebody asked me why, and I honestly didn't have an answer. And I had a student volunteer. She said, I'm from Mongolia, and let me tell you about, what we eat and why we eat these things. And it was fascinating. And it was so, such a rich discussion because people were willing to share these pieces of themselves. I've had students from China discuss issues of air quality in China, and these just really add depth to these discussions that I had not experienced before I started inviting more of the students' whole selves into the classroom.
Thanks, Dina. And it's great to hear that you and your students are learning together. David Tuwei, you've shared with us that you are originally from Kenya. We've had many faculty members who were born and raised outside of the United States join the ITL program. Why do you think it's important for our students to learn from faculty members and instructors who have an international background?
Yes, I'm from Kenya, Gail, and I came to the United States for advanced degrees, and of course now I'm here in Minnesota. And so I think in terms of that question, I think it harkens back to what we said at the very beginning, the idea of global readiness. And so I think what students benefit or take away from international faculty, they deepen their international and global learning. In a way, it almost prepares students to be global ready. It makes students to know the knowledge systems, of other people around the globe. They come to learn about the cultures, about the belief systems and even their attitudes. And in general, of course, expand the outlook of the students in terms of what happens outside, of their localities or even where they live. Secondly, I think it also develops students' cultural self-awareness. And throughout ITL, I think we've always emphasized the fact that, the learning of others is almost the learning of oneself. And that harkens back to what Dina just said. So when I teach about, how people use the mobile phone in Uganda, for example, where they share and do other things, I remember one student in my class kind of saying, "Oh, I used to see that in my family several years ago." So in so many ways, these are the similarities, there are differences, but yes, there are similarities. And we come to learn that, in as much as we are different, we are also the same in many other aspects.
Thanks, David. The fact that you're reminding us that students can learn a lot from teachers who do not share the same cultural background is really meaningful, and how we do that in an intentional way really matters. I think what I'm going to do right now is just shift gears a little bit and kind of zoom back out and really ask David Beard. You've been with us the longest in the program on the panel here, representing the other faculty over the years. And we know that this program has meant a lot to you over the years, as it has for the other colleagues in the program. Why has it really mattered for you to be involved in the ITL program?
I mean, it's been an integral part of the development of my whole career as a faculty person. And I think, first of all, because it functions as a community. Organically, that community contains the people I've needed to grow, sometimes when thinking about my teaching, sometimes when thinking about fostering connections across the campuses or community connections with Iceland, even, for Pete's sake. And sometimes as I'm trying to make sure that my research stays most lively, most energetic. Yeah, if you're not a faculty member, maybe the analogy that I can use that best expresses it is it's kind of like when you sign up for a softball team and you're talking with the dude next to you on the softball team, and that person says, "Well, actually my company is hiring and I think you'd be great for the job." And suddenly the softball team becomes like key to reshaping your whole career. This is my softball team.
Good, we're all hitting home runs, right? Thanks, David. Great. Well, we know that we have so much more that we can hear from our panelists. We really want to just shift a little bit more and zoom way out and ask Kate here kind of a big picture question. Kate, you've worked with so many faculty over the years to support their teaching and student learning in general. We're all really curious what you think makes ITL unique and all of the efforts that we've been doing here at the University of Minnesota to internationalize the curriculum, and how are they different from other initiatives?
That's a big question. I have been at the university and involved in the work of working with faculty and instructors on teaching and learning for over 20 years. But I would say first with ITL, it is the people. I think as many of you have mentioned, we have a fabulous team. Like the staff support team is so committed and so invested. And it's a partnership across GPS Alliance, the Center for Educational Innovation, and academic technology support services. But in addition to that, it's the faculty community that David was just talking about, and Dina as well, that there is this investment of passionate people who keep coming back, who stay together, who reinvest in each other and themselves. And when I think of David Beard, I always think of that really gentle, challenging question, David, that you ask of other faculty whenever we get together, that just kind of nudges people along in their thinking. And we all, I think, learn so much from each other. So it's this really outstanding community of people. The other thing that I think makes this program somewhat unique from other teaching and learning programs is what David Toué, what you were saying about this, the course design model that we use at DThink Forwarded is really focuses on transformational learning, significant learning that involves asking instructors to write goals for their students about what are you going to learn about yourself in this course? What are you going to learn about other people? You know, what are you going to care about as a result of being in this course? And that shifts the vibe of this work that is so human-centered and so kind of human-focused that it's just a really inspiring place to be.
Thanks, Kate, and thank you for your partnership over the years, and definitely a big shout out to the team and all the teammates over the years who've been a part of this initiative. Amanda, you are the student representative on the panel today. How prepared do you feel to enter a globally interconnected society?
Well, I would have to say, I don't know that my experience here at the U has been a typical one, but I do feel ready. I have been really lucky. I've had multiple opportunities to engage with communities and scholars from around the world on issues like sustainable food systems, water conservation, and gender equity. I've been able to travel internationally for research. I have friends and colleagues and students who are from countries around the world, and I'm really fortunate to work with the team here at the University of Minnesota on internationalizing the campus and curriculum. I'm also in a department that has recently developed, thanks to the leadership of Jim Perry, who kind of led this effort, a 10-year strategic plan for international and intercultural engagement, which is really exciting for fisheries, wildlife, and conservation biology. And my current research focus is on issues of global significance in higher education. So I feel ready, and I feel lucky, because I know that not every student has had those same opportunities and the degree of exposure that I've had, but we have a growing number of instructors here at the university, and in some cases, like in my case, entire departments or colleges that are working to help make sure every student who graduates is global ready, and I think that's a great start.
That's really affirming. Thanks, Amanda. And indeed, you're right that we have a strong foundation and a great beginning with a lot of work ahead of us. So in thinking about what's ahead, let's really think about the future. I think it would be great for our audience to hear from each of our panelists now about the future. And as you each peer into the future and consider how our universities and colleges across the world are preparing students to live and work in an interconnected society, what is your hope or your vision for our systems of higher education? And we'll start with David Toué.
Thank you, Gail. So I teach the media, and so I talk a lot about the interconnectedness of the world, brought by new communication technologies. And so I normally say, we live in a changing world. And so I hope that our system of higher education, can keep pace with this changing world dynamics, where we see interconnectedness of people around the globe, because of globalization and other processes. And I also think that, our universities, our system of higher education, as major centers of research and new knowledge, they can lead, in this effort to, bring this vision in our students. And I also think that our system of higher education, of course, should lead by preparing the minds of students to live and work in this, in an interconnected world, to work with others around the world to solve what I had said before as the global challenges of our time. And of course, to achieve all this, it doesn't happen in one day, it doesn't happen in one night. It requires some kind of new forward thinking, mostly coming from educational, in higher education leadership.
Thanks, David. Let's hear from Dina.
So I'm in biology, and one of the things that I notice as sort of an attitude in the STEM fields is that somehow STEM is devoid of culture, or that it operates in isolation from culture. And I think that's a really damaging perspective, and it's one that I'm still learning to move away from. So I would love for us in STEM to start acknowledging the cultural influences on the disciplines themselves, from what language we publish our research in to what we accept as evidence. And there's so many aspects, and the way we generate our questions that we're looking to address. There's so many aspects by which culture is influencing the STEM fields, and we need to acknowledge that, because we need to diversify STEM, because that is where progress comes, is when you have diverse groups approaching problems. And so we need to acknowledge this impact of culture. And I'd like everyone, students and faculty and practitioners, to be able to learn to acknowledge that their culture, or where they're most comfortable, is not necessarily the default. I think a lot of times, especially in the Midwest, where we the broadcast journalists tend to sound like we do, and we think that we're this default, and that's not the case. And so to acknowledge and appreciate that culture impacts all fields, including STEM.
Thanks, Dina. Kate, what are your thoughts?
Dina, that is amazing. We need to have a whole webinar just dedicated to you digging into that, I think. I would like to see in the future a kind of an acceleration of the great work that's being done by, we have seen faculty who participate in this program doing a great deal of scholarship and receiving teaching awards and receiving promotions in large part because of the work that they're doing here with advancing global learning. And so if we could just continue that good work and then kind of accelerate and heighten the rewards across more areas of the university, I think that would be a great thing to see in higher ed, not just at the University of Minnesota, but nationwide and worldwide.
Well, we could all use more celebration, indeed. Mm-hmm. Thank you. David Beard, what are your thoughts?
I thought about this one, and I'm going to express an anxiety. And I'm betting there are people in the audience who can help me with this, right? Because there are people in this audience who aren't academics, I would guess, or not solely academics. They may be leaders in business and industry. And they may be of a generation who took a world history class when they were undergraduates, who have a strong, what we think of as a liberal understanding of how liberal arts made them successful, how the soft skills of communicating with people who are different with them are an essential part of making them the leaders they are in their businesses and industries today. And I got to tell you, if you're listening, we need you. We need your voice in making sure that these remain the priorities of our university, that programs like this that teach skills to succeed in this way remain part of the priorities of our university. And so I'm looking at you and I'm saying, if you got a moment, we need some help. So help.
Indeed, indeed. Folks can email us, contact us. This is all about all of us. And Amanda, what are your thoughts?
Well, a number of us mentioned at the beginning today that students know they need to be prepared to address a range of globe-spanning issues when they graduate. And really, if we're going to prepare students to meet that challenge, I'd like to see higher ed institutions set their sights on doing more than just preparing students to enter a global workforce. I'd like to see us prepare students to be engaged, self-aware, effective global citizens, people who are ready to make change, to bring about more sustainable and just and inclusive systems and global relationships. Students who see that their fates are just as connected to the lives of people on the other side of the world as they are to their neighbors and friends and family at home. And that's really no small task, but I think we've started down that path. And a lot of our students are energized and ready to help kind of nudge us along as we continue to encourage one another and make sure we get there.
Thank you. And we really appreciate all of these hopeful visions and also challenges that you've each set out again for us. So we're coming close to wrapping up here. Unbelievable how fast our hour has gone. As everyone in the audience can see, we are really encouraged by all that's been done to ensure that all of our students are graduating with the skills, the knowledge, and those perspectives that are necessary to understand the world and work effectively to improve it. But we'll tell you that we're just at the beginning and we have a long way to go. We have many faculty and instructors and students that we still need to reach, but we do have hope. And we want to hold on to that and stay motivated. So I want to thank our wonderful panel today, Amanda Sames, David Beards, David Touet, Dina Wassenberg, Kate Martin for your participation today. And a big shout out again to our team. And we would like to end with a quick quote from a student, because that's so important that we end with a student voice. And then I'm going to toss it over to Jen. And thanks everyone for being here today.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending. We hope you enjoyed this wonderful discussion. Thanks to the panelists for their time and their energy and their inspiration. Just a really quick wrap up. We've recorded this session, as we mentioned before, and we will shortly send you an email with a recap of this event and a link that you can watch again or share with other people. And we don't have a specific date for our next event, but I want to entice you to think about joining us for the next event in May, which will discuss social justice in language education. The university has received a grant and is really leading the way on incorporating social justice themes into the language learning curriculum. And so another great topic next month. So look for that email. And again, thank you for attending. Goodbye.